My name is Ivy, and the moment I learned about my cancer diagnosis, both my mother in law and husband turned their backs on me. Our marriage, which was supposed to endure sickness and health, crumbled when my husband Isaac realized that my time might be limited. He chose to run away and ghost me. Fortunately, I found solace in the unexpected support of my father in law, Theodore, who turned out to be the father in law of the century. At 31 years old, facing the devastation of cancer after a couple of challenging months was unexpected. However, what truly baffled me was the audacity of my mother in law, Georgia. Despite the vows of marriage, she compelled Isaac to abandon me, claiming there was no hope left. Such heartlessness is beyond comprehension. Georgia's monstrous side, rooted in an inflated sense of self importance, always fueled her judgmental remarks. While economic differences between our families were not substantial, her family's additional wealth of around 500 created a sense of superiority. Beyond finances, our relationship faced the common misunderstandings found in any marriage. However, with my mother-in-law, these clashes escalated to toxic levels. She consistently mistreated me based on her misinterpretations, making it a painful experience, with Isaac occasionally attempting to mediate. The turning point came 7 weeks ago when I received the gut-wrenching cancer diagnosis. Initially, we tried to come to terms with it, but my mother-in-law's behavior became increasingly erratic and toxic. Her influence over Isaac grew, and her misinterpretations led to painful situations. A few days after sharing my diagnosis, she callously suggested Isaac move to the bedroom TV since I would soon be confined to bed, adding insult to injury. When I implored Isaac to address his mother's insensitivity, he initially complied, only to later join in her heartless laughter. He dismissed my feelings, asking me to chill out and take a joke. As they continued their classless jokes and mockery, even in the absence of Theodore, my father-in-law, I felt isolated and defenseless. Theodore, often away from home, preferred the company of friends, leaving me vulnerable to the mother-son duo's heartless antics. I endured their absurdities while grappling with my health struggles, a situation that would be almost comical if it weren't painfully real. Fortunately, we didn't have children, and as time passed, it became evident that Isaac was far from an ideal partner for parenthood. While not entirely monstrous, they occasionally lent a hand, often accompanied by backhanded comments and negativity. Drained and worn down, I couldn't summon the energy to wage wars or respond to hurtful words in my already burdened heart. The worst was yet to come, and it arrived on a day when Isaac was absent due to work commitments. As my health deteriorated, with regular bouts of sickness and loss of control over my senses, Theodore out of the house, it fell upon Georgia to handle the mess. While there were no jokes that day, her silent treatment spoke volumes, dispelling any doubts about her feelings towards me. Hint, she did not like me. It was evident she was growing tired of me, and the scariest part was that she didn't shy away from showing it. In desperation, I suggested hiring a nurse to lighten the load. You'd think it was a reasonable solution, but according to Georgia, Theodore had refused to even consider it in a conversation I was convinced she had never had with him in my presence. I couldn't help but believe that if he knew of my suffering, he wouldn't deny me help. However, according to Georgia, they were already taking care of me, and the nurse would be a waste of money. This wasn't an isolated incident. It happened multiple times. Despite living comfortably with her husband's money, when I needed genuine help, there was silence. To add insult to injury, she started encouraging Isaac to meet new people, by which she meant women, different women. Initially, I thought she wanted him to connect with those dealing with sick relatives like me, but I was wrong. Her ulterior motive was clear. She wanted him to get in touch with women to easily replace me. At first, Isaac played the role of the faithful husband, but slowly his behavior changed. Late nights out transformed into late-night phone conversations, audible as I drifted in and out of sleep. The gravity of the situation became painfully clear 2 weeks ago, in the middle of my afternoon nap. When I heard the front door open and then shut, followed by the murmur of multiple voices, mostly female, filling the living room. I knew Georgia was in the house. Isaac was at the office. It was just 9 days ago that one of these women returned, making it evident that her visit wasn't for me. She came to see Isaac. They stayed in the living room, seemingly acting decently, but my intuition sensed something was off. My suspicions were confirmed when Georgia left me alone, sneaking out of the house, assuming I was already asleep. I couldn't decipher what happened between them in that single hour, but I knew they were making plans that didn't include me. The peculiar thing was that this woman never visited me. She was always there for Isaac. 5 days ago, Georgia approached me, announcing that she had arranged for a nurse to take over my duties. I couldn't help but question her abrupt change of heart. Her response was absurd and infuriating. They were leaving me. When I pressed for an explanation, she casually answered that they needed space to accept that I would soon die. I was left dumbfounded. It made no sense. That wasn't a reasonable reaction to my situation. According to her logic, she had found a new woman for Isaac, someone perfectly healthy, as if my illness was repulsive. According to her, Isaac needed space to move on. How heartless could one person be? It was beyond comprehension, beyond any semblance of human decency. Their grand idea was to leave me on my own while they enjoyed their newfound freedom, not burdened by the responsibilities of caring for a sick person. Georgia had found a replacement for me, a potential wife for Isaac, who would conveniently step into my shoes the moment I passed away. The audacity of it all was staggering. She expected me to accept this fate because I was battling cancer, as if my diagnosis granted them the right to abandon me. I attempted to talk to Isaac about the situation, but he conveniently avoided me as much as possible. In the brief moments we spoke, he reassured me not to worry too much, and before I knew it, they were gone. Amidst these sudden developments, another strange occurrence took place. My father-in-law, who had always kept his distance, started calling and messaging me. The nurse stepped up, tending to my every need, from cooking to cleaning. Everything that Georgia and Isaac had promised but failed to deliver. Georgia initially paid for her, but eventually, the entire responsibility fell on my shoulders, and I started using whatever savings I had left to compensate her. Theodore, who had maintained his silence during the entire fiasco, now bombarded my phone with calls and messages. In sickness and in health, Isaac had promised, yet this was his response. He proved to be nothing short of trash. Now, I'm utterly curious about what my father-in-law wants. Surely he was not calling without reason. I'll update you with the top comments from the original post. Comment number 1. Look, I don't entirely want to side with your family, but it does kind of make sense why they took such big steps to preserve their own feelings. Losing somebody hurts, and I've lost several of my loved ones, and I still hate knowing them. Well, it would have saved me so much pain if I hadn't known them. Everybody has the right to defend themselves against that kind of pain. Your family was a little too extreme, though, and I'm really sorry for you. Cancer sounds bad enough. Maybe try contacting your own family. Where are they anyway? Comment number 2. It's a shame doing this isn't criminal, but the way your husband has behaved is disgusting. Forget your mother-in-law. Your husband is the biggest trash here. I wonder what your father-in-law wants, but maybe you should talk to him once as well. Maybe he wants to say something important. Update number 1. My father-in-law and I had a conversation, and now we find ourselves living in the same neighborhood. He spent a fortune to rent the nearest home to where I currently live, away from his wife and son. Yeah, it might sound surprising, but after years of silence, he finally found the courage to speak up. 7 days ago, he reached out to me again, and I decided it was time to confront the truth. I realized that clarifying things with him once and for all would help the situation. I decided that if my family wanted to cut ties with me, I would not back down either. Dying alone would be much better than crying over crappy people like Georgia and Isaac. In the past 2 weeks, my health has continued to go down. I find myself bleeding profusely, and even the thought of food disgusted me. When he called, I mustered the strength to answer. ready to hear whatever he wanted to talk about. The moment I picked up the phone, he immediately apologized for staying silent for so long and did not shy away from accepting whatever his wife and son did to me as wrong. He confessed that he was not paying attention to what was going on at home, and then told me how shocked he was with their decision to abandon me. He found their actions utterly classless, crass, and intolerable, and no longer wanted to stay with them. That's why he reached out to me. Well, since I held no grudge against him and was in a desperate situation, I accepted him back into my life. At that point, I was far too tired to care much about the details, and so for the past 7 days, we've been living as neighbors. He comes over to check up on me 3 times a day and has also decided to take the responsibility of paying for my nurse with her weekly payments. But that's not really what is developing in these past weeks. There are a couple more things that happened. Allow me to explain. When the news of my father-in-law staying with me reached my mother-in-law and husband, they acted very swiftly. They reached out to him first, leaving voicemails, sending messages. They kept apologizing to him and then asked if he was upset with them. My father-in-law showed me every single message. It was comical to me because it was obvious why they were so desperate. They were heavily dependent on him and could not afford anything. My father-in-law getting upset at them. Well, it's not helping. But he remained silent, ignoring every call and message. Days turned into a week, and their desperation started to grow. Suddenly, they started bombarding me with phone calls and messages. At this time, neither the calls nor the messages stopped. Initially, their messages had been about little things, but now it was about them at my father-in-law's suggestion. I made a decision not to answer their calls or messages. Their newfound concern felt fake, and it was evident they did not care for me but for themselves. Who wants to play that game? I was sick, but I was not a doormat. Their desperation reached an absolute peak when they showed up at my door with a bag of fruits and lots of words of sympathy. Before my nurse or I could update them about my health, they started probing about my father-in-law's whereabouts. Since he was neither at my house nor theirs, I replied just as he had instructed me to in such a situation. I explained that his office was nearby, and staying here saved him extra cash he would be required to spend from the new place they stay at. They were not content with my response. Financially, they had always been well off, and my explanation likely did not fulfill their assumptions. Regardless, they accepted it at face value, seemingly uncaring whether it was true. They again asked me about my health, stayed some 5 more minutes at my home, and then told me that they needed to be somewhere important. But I did not care. I wanted them to leave already. She said they would leave in a while, and I was not sure what they wanted. But I hoped that they would have the sensibility to address what they had done to me. At the very least, I expected her to offer me an explanation for their actions. I assumed I could ask for that much, but sensibility was clearly beyond their grasp. Instead of doing any of that, my mother-in-law dropped the bomb while Isaac was in the kitchen. She revealed that Isaac was getting interested in the women he was seeing. The words hit me like a ton of bricks. Even though I had sensed their intentions, I was not shocked that they had made these kinds of plans, as it was clear from the beginning. But that they were dead serious about going through with it was another matter. This was no elaborate joke. I was still alive. It had only been a little over a month since my diagnosis, and they were already going to such lengths to distance themselves. As one of my comments pointed out, is this how you defend yourself against the potential of getting hurt by isolating the person in need? The audacity of that woman knew no boundaries. And if that was not enough, she claimed that she had planned a few dates for Isaac and the other women. My nurse, bless her, tried to put an end to this cruel conversation, informing my mother-in-law that I needed rest. Then she mentioned her hopes that I might attend, quote, at least his engagement party. Yeah, the audacity rises. But she did not stop there. Oh no, she promised to send me the divorce papers on Isaac's behalf, indifferent to any response I might have. According to her, it was better to handle the paperwork before I lost my senses, as if I were on the brink of insanity. Yeah, her logic. It would save Isaac potential heartache, and the divorce would allow him to get over me quickly with this new woman by his side. My nurse, her eyes fixed on me, probably wondered how I was managing to endure such insanity. Yesterday, true to her promise, she sent the divorce papers, and Isaac had already signed them, along with a confirmation from his side indicating that he did not care about me at all. Although deeply hurt, I cannot say I was entirely surprised. I always knew what they were like. Instead of reacting impulsively, as I desperately wanted to, I waited. I waited to share this news with my father-in-law. When I told him about the divorce papers, he looked not just disgusted and disturbed but also betrayed. After spending countless years with his son and wife, he must have held out some hope for decency and compassion. Yet, he made a promise. He vowed to take his weekend off the next week, setting aside time for us to confront this legal nightmare together. I was not sure about his intentions, but facing a more stable person while I was dealing with my illness seemed like a better option than dealing with it on my own. Update number 2. He came over to my place and then told me that he had been thinking over some things for some time now. When I questioned him about what he meant, he introduced me to his lawyer dealing with our case. He informed me that his first words to the lawyer were that he had given enough time for his wife and son to come around, but since he saw no improvement in their behavior, he was going with the plan. And I knew what he was planning. On that particular weekend, he came to my home with his lawyer. I was excited about whatever he had in store. We began discussing the divorce situation, and then he dropped the news on me, the thing he said he had been contemplating for a while. He wanted to make changes to his will. Even with his lawyer attempting to discuss the matter seriously, he kept insisting that he had thought enough on the topic and did not want to think about it anymore. It took an entire day of intense discussions, but by the day's end, I found myself the sole heir to every possession that he owned. He had cut them out entirely, leaving them with nothing more than a small plot in a barren countryside, a worthless piece of land that had nothing around for miles and miles. I knew my father-in-law had just made their lives harder, and I thought that was the end of it. But then he surprised me again. He summoned another pair of lawyers, and they were discussing divorce. Yes, you read that right. It was no longer solely about me. My father-in-law was on the brink of making the most important decision of his life. He planned not only to strip his wife of everything, but also to divorce her overnight. He looked at me and asked if I was all right with divorcing Isaac. After everything Isaac put me through, I did not need to think twice about it. I responded firmly, stating that after all this betrayal, I would be a fool to stay with him. And just like that, it was settled. I was going to divorce Isaac, and my father-in-law was going to divorce his wife, Georgia, and there's no turning back. The lawyer suggested we wait at least a month before filing for divorce, so that it would not look too hurried and planned to the court. We just agreed to wait. While all this was going on in our homes, my mother-in-law kept badgering me to sign the divorce papers. Isaac's silence was less annoying than whatever she was doing. It was like she wanted to get rid of me. I hoped that in the days to come, she would have to deal with wilder consequences than Isaac. I tried to tell her off, giving my chemotherapy treatment as an excuse, hoping that she would stop. To some extent, it worked. She lowered the frequency of calling me, but her demands never ended. She even dared to send me a picture of the women she intended for Isaac, adding insults to the injury with her questioning, "Isn't she pretty for Isaac?" Care to explain to me if you would have dealt with something like that? However, all of her crafty behavior only made my father-in-law more determined. He never forgot to apologize for his wife's behavior, and in a mere 5 days, this month will end, and both my mother-in-law and Isaac will receive the consequences of their actions. My mother-in-law will get a legal notice, and Isaac will receive those signed divorce papers he wants. If all goes according to plan, this would be the end of our interactions on all levels. Update number 3. The divorce bombshell shook Georgia's world. Much to my amusement, she had been prepared for many things, but not for this. Upon receiving the legal notice, she dropped a storm of calls on my father-in-law's phone. When he refused to answer, she stormed over to both our places, demanding an explanation. My father-in-law was at my place for his routine checkup, and he had no choice but to tell her the blunt truth in my presence. He was tired of her and had contemplated this step for a long time. It was clear why he preferred the company of his friends over staying at home with his wife. Immediately, she broke down almost on her knees. She pleaded with him not to leave, and it was at that moment that the reality had hit her. My father-in-law kicked her out of his life. Then Isaac barged in, and because his parents were divorcing, he was now worried about himself. He knew things were not going to end very well for him, and he promised me that he did not want a divorce. But his mother forced him to have it. I told him I didn't care. This entire mom-son drama went on for the whole day until they left in the evening, empty-handed and hopeless. The legal proceedings were progressing relatively smoothly, and just when it seemed like we were on the verge of closure, my father-in-law dropped the truth. He claimed to have nothing to his name. Despite this, the court still ordered him to pay a certain amount of money to Georgia each month. It was a financial loss for us, but my father-in-law was relieved to have finally cut her off from his life. Meanwhile, the issue with the will was yet to be out in the open, and the court admonished Isaac for abandoning me and told him to pay me alimony. We hoped that with everything settled, life would finally calm down, and I would be able to deal with my upcoming painful months in peace without any of their drama. However, our hopes were shattered when Georgia and Isaac unexpectedly showed up at my house for yet another meeting. During their unexpected visit, they came up with an idea, a negotiation of sorts, after they found out the truth about the will. If they had approached it differently, I might have felt sympathy, but they chose to be cruel. Georgia, in her typical manner, claimed that since I was not going to live long, it made no sense for me to hold so much property in my name. I just brushed off her words. I had already made a decision with my father-in-law. We knew what was going to happen as tensions escalated. Isaac, viewing my response as an insult to his mother, immediately thought of violence and raised his hand against me. My nurse immediately called the police, and by the time they arrived, the mother and son duo had fled the scene. Using my nurse and my father-in-law's witnesses, I asked for a restraining order. Given my fragile state due to my illness, it did not take long for the order to be issued. The court warned Isaac about his behavior, stating that repeating such actions would lead to an immediate charge, no questions asked. Since then, none of those two have contacted either of us, and honestly, considering my health, I don't care. The doctors gave me a time limit now, and I'm just hoping I proved them all wrong. Other than that, no new drama. I'm glad most of you were respectful enough, and yes, I might have liked a couple of dark jokes you played on me. By the way, I've got none, and that's why this entire thing was so hard for me. Top comments from the final update. Comment number 1. You're the literal definition of taking everything to the grave. LMNO. Hey, that's cool though. Your father-in-law's smart decision saved you big time because honestly, it's so rare to have that kind of thinking person around you. It's true that you may not live long, but the way your family reacted, wow, that was extreme. I'm glad I've never dealt with something like this. They're toxic as hell. At least they will die poor. Comment number 2. I'm so curious. Is the woman you're talking about? Didn't she, know that you're sick? How could one woman be so mean to another? I mean, where's the sisterhood? All for a dang man, and one that would not even stay faithful to the same woman he vowed to stay with for all his life. Like, wow. I'm so glad I like girls because honestly, this is too much for me. Good luck soon. I hope you win this war. Well, we just reviewed 2 of the comments, and I have to agree with the last one. I can't believe somebody would be so mean to somebody else, knowing that they were battling such an illness. But yet, OP had to deal with this mother-in-law of today's story that was an absolute nightmare. Lucky for OP, she did have her father-in-law who went so far to try to save her, get her back, give her support, and basically get her to cut out the toxicness, which was unfortunately his son and his wife. I want to know your thoughts on this one, guys. Go ahead, drop your comments down below. This one was an intense one. It had sad moments. It had exhilarating moments, but overall, it looks like karma came again. So drop your thoughts down below, guys. My name is Mr. Reddit. I narrate these sorts of stories every single day. If you guys want to be a part of these daily videos, all you have to do is subscribe to the channel. Hit that like notification. And well, I hope you have a great day. I'll see you tomorrow. Remember, it's cool to be kind. Peace.
All right, everyone's presentations are done.
Nick, the manager, said as he tried to move the discussion forward.
Excuse me, I haven't. I recently found out something. Nick interrupted me and began to speak. There's apparently someone in this department who didn't graduate high school and is just a part-timer. Meetings should be for employees only. Absolutely right. His lackey, Mike, of course, agreed with Nick. I'm leaving. After leaving the meeting room, I started to shut down my computer. I noticed that an email had arrived, not in my personal inbox, but in the company's shared email.
Thinking, there's no point in speaking up, no one will listen, I went home quietly.
The next day, I heard a commotion from Nick's desk.
He was staring at his computer screen, his face pale.
Nick! Is something wrong? Mike looked at the screen with him. And he turned even paler than Nick. Why is he so angry? Knowing the reason for Mike's distress, I thought to myself, serves them right. My name is Adam.
My mother passed away when I was in the 9th grade, and I was raised by my father.
Well, you could hardly call it being raised.
After my mother passed, my father changed. He drowned his sorrows in alcohol, and though he still went to work, he squandered our living expenses on horse racing.
Because of that, I had to start working part-time as soon as I entered high school. Every month, I went to the convenience store with bills in hand that couldn't be auto-deducted from my father's account. Even though I endured it because I didn't want to be alone, I reached my limit in my 2nd year of high school and dropped out. I found a live-in job at a distant inn. Thank you for everything.
The day I left home, my father, still staring at the TV, spoke.
Take care. That was our last conversation.
Back then, 18 wasn't the age of majority, so I needed my father's permission to work, and I couldn't hide my place of employment.
Yet, my father never visited me even once.
I kept working just to survive, and before I knew it, I was 42. Years of hard work paid off, and I was transferred to the headquarters. I was thrilled to be recognized by the company, as I thought I'd be working in the field until retirement due to my lack of formal education.
Listen up.
Our work can change the future of our employees.
Don't drag us down.
On my first day after the transfer, Nick, dressed in an expensive suit, spoke sternly.
There was a reason for this. Our inn was located in a prominent tourist destination, known so well that everyone in the state could sing its commercial jingle. At its peak, we had 5 locations within the state. But that was long ago. Due to financial difficulties and aging facilities, only the place where I had worked for many years and the original establishment remained. I was prepared to lose my job anytime, but now there was a glimmer of hope. With the rise of social media, the tourist area where the inn was located started gaining attention again. Depending on how hard the sales department, where I was transferred, worked, we could either thrive or be forced to give up this prime location to the new hotel chains continuously popping up. For Nick, who had switched careers from another industry to strengthen our sales, this was a battle he couldn't afford to lose. I understood why he had to be strict. I will do my best. Nick sneered at my enthusiastic declaration. Did you not hear what I said? I'm sorry. I thought I was listening carefully. Out of habit from years of customer service, I apologized reflexively, though I had no idea what had offended him. Someone was watching me with a smirk. In this department, there are those who are expected to excel and those who have been shoved here because they have nowhere else to go. You are the latter. It was Mike, the section chief. He's 7 years younger, at 35. But he was called to headquarters much earlier than I was and had been moving around within the headquarters ever since. I'm not jealous, but I can't accept that he's my boss. Graduating from a prestigious university, he has an unusually high pride and caused many problems as a newbie, making things very difficult for me when I was the front desk leader. When I found out Mike was transferred to the sales department a month before me, I was disheartened. Mike is right. With just a middle school diploma, there's not much you can do. Don't even think about achieving results. As if I didn't exist, Nick remarked, I'm thirsty. Mike eagerly ran to the coffee maker. It seems Mike is Nick's lackey. I regretted being happy about my transfer to headquarters, wishing I had stayed on site forever. Send a direct mail to every company on this list by the end of the day. Nick only assigned me tasks that even a new graduate could handle. What? There are over 1,000 companies. You want me to send to all of them by today? Yes, if you and your fellow misfits split the work, even those with nowhere else to go should finish by today. I glanced at the employees typing away expressionlessly. They were worn out from customer service, only thinking about leaving on time, or were women reassigned after having children. With zero motivation for work. Even Sam, a new graduate from the same university as Mike, who was supposed to be among the expected achievers, had no enthusiasm for the job. Having joined the company wanting to do customer service. I don't care what they say, I plan to quit anytime, he said. Only Nick and Mike were highly motivated, making all the decisions between the two of them. I originally only wanted to work at the inn to survive and had no particular attachment to this job. I swallowed my words, thinking I had no right to reprimand them. About a month after the transfer, Nick told us with a frustrated look. To commemorate the 50th anniversary, we've decided to create a plan exclusive for one group per day. Originally, Mike and I were supposed to come up with it, but our president, Mr. Thompson, insists on hearing everyone's opinions. So, you all get a chance. As Nick explained, Mike began handing out prints. Make sure not to embarrass Nick. If your ideas are half-baked, you'll have to redo them. It seemed that they had printed his handwritten notes by Mr. Thompson, which included several questions and a section for free responses. It made sense why Nick had to seek our input, given that all responses had to be submitted to Mr. Thompson. We were given a week to think about it, and a meeting was scheduled to compile our ideas. My plan is to let guests enjoy both the old and modern America. Nick began the presentations. Guests would watch a master confectioner at a nearby traditional sweet shop make sweets in front of them. The welcome drink would be premium tea in a bottle. Nick's plan was certainly attractive. After his presentation, Nick called on us to present in the order we were seated. Just as I stood up for my turn. All right, everyone's presentations are done. Excuse me, I haven't. I recently found out something. Nick interrupted me. There's someone in this department who didn't graduate high school and is just a part-timer. He was likely talking about me. I joined the company as a part-timer and was made a full-time employee when I turned 20. That was 20 years ago, so Nick and Mike probably had no chance to know until recently. Meetings should be for employees only. Absolutely right. After that, Nick kept creating opportunities to solicit everyone's opinions, purposefully excluding me from speaking. The meeting unexpectedly heated up and went past the scheduled end time. A few people asked to leave, and the discussion continued with the remaining few. Still here? Normally, you'd leave in that situation. Though I had no attachment to the job initially, hearing kind words from customers made me want to make them happier. For someone like me, with nowhere to go, the inn was my home and customer service was my life. I felt pathetic about my current self. I'm leaving. I left the conference room and started shutting down my computer. I noticed an email had arrived, not in my personal inbox, but in the company's shared email. Thinking no one would listen to what I had to say anyway, I quietly went home. The next day, while preparing the DM as instructed, I heard a commotion from Nick's desk. In his haste to stand up, he hit his knee on the desk. He stared at his computer screen, his face pale. Nick! What's wrong? Mike, thinking he should be the first to rush over, approached Nick while still wearing his coat. He peered at the screen with Nick. And he turned even paler than Nick. Why is he so angry? Who is responsible for this company? Nick, more irritated than ever, asked, and Mike answered without checking. Probably Sam. Sam wasn't there because he was attending a morning training session for new hires. Nick gave up on getting angry and returned his gaze to the screen. They were looking at an email that arrived right after the end of the working day yesterday. Apparently, no one, including me, had checked it before leaving. The email was from a large company that used us for their annual employee trips. The president and executives of that company also frequently used our services personally. President of the company, Mr. Mason himself had declared that neither he nor his company would ever use our services again. Well, some companies cancel their employee trips or stop using our services due to financial struggles.
Let's just move on. Mike kept wiping the sweat from his forehead with a handkerchief.
Knowing why Mike was so agitated, I quietly watched their interaction.
Do you know how much revenue we get from that company?
We can find other guests to fill the rooms, but we'll lose the banquet costs,
gift shop revenue, rental car fees, and more. Moreover, the gifts were supposed to be prepared by the traditional confectionery shop involved in Nick's proposed plan.
If it's known that we incurred such a huge loss at this critical time, Nick's position in the company would be jeopardized.
Nick took a deep breath, seemingly trying to calm himself. All right, Mike. Go to New York right now and apologize to Mr. Mason. What? You're coming with me, right? I have urgent work to do.
I trust you, which is why I'm entrusting this to you.
Please. Mike, believing Nick's sincerity, agreed with a determined look on his face, saying, yes. That's Nick for you.
Even if Mike went to apologize, Nick would shift all the blame onto him if the client didn't change their mind. Well, it was Mike's fault to begin with, so it served him right.
About 3 hours later, Sam answered a call from somewhere and repeatedly apologized, saying, I'm very sorry. Everyone watched to see what was happening.
After ending the call, he informed Nick with a weary tone. When Mike arrived at the client's company, he only made things worse, further infuriating Mr. Mason.
He was demanding, get his boss here immediately.
It was no wonder Sam was exhausted, dealing with such a call right after returning from training.
What is that idiot doing? All right, Adam, you're coming with me. If sacrificing Mike didn't work, then I must be next.
Normally, I'd want to refuse at all costs, but I saw an opportunity in this situation.
If I can be of assistance, I'd be happy to join you.
I immediately followed Nick, and we flew to New York. When we introduced ourselves at the reception, it became clear how serious the situation was.
As the receptionist personally escorted us to the president's office, angry voices leaked through the door, making both Nick and me uneasy. Excuse me. I'm Nick, the supervisor.
I understand my subordinate has caused you trouble, and I deeply apologize. Nick, with his experience in the corporate world, knew enough to offer an apology before excuses. However, his customer service skills left much to be desired. I sighed as I saw Mike trembling like a small dog in the corner of the room.
What kind of training are you giving your subordinates? Mr. Mason glared at Nick with a red face. The intensity of his gaze made even Nick take a step back. Regrettably, I joined this company only 2 years ago and was unaware of Mike's issues. I should have identified his shortcomings sooner. Indeed. I should have realized sooner.
No sensible person would come to apologize and then give a lengthy presentation on the drawbacks of not using their in. Nick froze, his mouth slightly open. Suspecting the worst, I picked up the documents that had fallen to the floor. It seemed Mike hastily prepared these documents on the plane, listing the disadvantages. Disadvantage 1: if you change the venue for the company trip, employees might suspect it's for cost-cutting reasons, leading to a negative impression. Reading it aloud half-jokingly, Nick snatched the papers from my hand and checked the contents with a furious expression. Among the stack of documents was a receipt from a nearby convenience store's copy machine. I felt a pang of dread,
hoping he hadn't shown the receipt as well. What do you think he said when I asked what kind of nerve he had to do this? I'm very sorry.
Faced with the dire situation, Nick must have thought there was nothing left to do but apologize. In a voice smaller than I'd ever heard from him, he uttered words of apology.
He said, I'm a Harvard graduate. I don't believe I said anything wrong. Mike, what have you done?
Forgetting his plan to pin the blame on Mike, Nick yelled loudly, even in front of Mr. Mason.
I didn't do anything wrong. You're still saying that? Look at him.
Mike pointed at me with a shaking hand.
I was assigned to headquarters in my 20s and now I'm a section chief. This guy only made it to headquarters at 42. Everything I've done proves I was right.
So why are we losing the contract? Having said his piece, Mike collapsed to the floor. Of course. You were sent there because you had nowhere else to go. Mike never expected to hear such words from someone he looked down upon. He lunged at me, and Nick hurriedly stepped in to stop him. Mr. Thompson told me Mike is a quick thinker, and to take good care of him. There's no way he was pushed aside. Don't make things worse here. He didn't say quick thinker, he said only quick-witted, didn't he? I don't remember that part. I recalled the many troubles Mike caused when he was a newbie. When Mike was on the front line, his pride was so high that he never apologized to customers. Customer service, especially in our job, doesn't work alone. It brings both good and bad situations. If the front staff or housekeepers made mistakes, or the cleaning company didn't properly clean a room, one had to apologize to the customers regardless of personal fault. Mike, in such situations, would never apologize, insisting he wasn't at fault. This often angered customers, and as the front desk leader, I frequently had to apologize on his behalf. He caused complaints and disrupted operations, which is why he was quickly moved to headquarters. In departments where he didn't interact directly with customers, his quick thinking was beneficial and things went well. But it seemed his flaws were starting to show. Corporate reservations are supposed to be entered into the system by the sales representative. But a quick check yesterday revealed that more than 10 items were missing from the client's reservation. The handover document clearly stated what needed to be prepared. Why didn't you enter it into the system? Why do we have to give them special treatment? Filling rooms near the banquet hall, setting up all the food in advance. Specifying the brand of wine, they're too demanding. No wonder he always angered customers, I thought, feeling a headache coming on. Grouping them in rooms near the banquet hall is for our benefit too. It makes it easier for the staff to set up beds and serve breakfast since everyone's schedule is synchronized. As for the other requests, Mr. Mason suggested them to lighten our load. I didn't know that. Nick finally seemed to realize that Mike was the one who had angered the client. What did you say to them? I just told them we wouldn't give them special treatment anymore. We shouldn't waste effort on things that don't bring in money. I was utterly exasperated at his lack of understanding of customer service. Of course, we shouldn't comply with unreasonable demands. But carrying over successful practices from past stays makes customers feel remembered and enhances their experience. Good memories encourage repeat visits. That's part of our job. I looked down at Mike, who was sitting on the floor. In our job, nothing is a waste. Mr. Thompson likely moved you to the sales department, hoping you'd finally understand this. How do you think he feels now that you failed to meet his expectations? Mike, tears in his eyes, fled the president's office. I was amazed he still hadn't apologized. You have it tough, Adam. It's okay, we're all employees of the same company. I deeply apologize for this disrespectful incident. Especially after all the care you've shown us. If it weren't for you, Adam, I really would have stopped staying here. When I heard you were moving to the sales department, I was willing to reconsider if you handled it. Seeing us talk so amicably, Nick's face contorted. Do you two know each other? Adam's service is excellent. I always requested him specifically. Normally, we don't accept specific staff requests, but we made an exception for Mr. Mason, adjusting my shifts accordingly. He had personally stayed at our hotel just before my transfer, and during casual conversation, I mentioned, I'm moving to the sales department soon. If I hadn't told him then, things could have been much worse. Please continue to take care of us. I look forward to it. On the return flight, Nick awkwardly offered me a can of beer. It's still working hours. Of course, I had no intention of forgiving him for a single beer. Nick might try to pin everything on Mike and avoid any consequences. While pondering this, a startling fact came to light. Nick, the tea bottles for the plan have arrived. I handed Nick a bottle labeled with our inn's name. They look good. What are you talking about? These are plastic bottles. I had assumed we would use the trendy, high-end bottling tea. But what arrived were ordinary plastic bottles of tea with customized labels. The only unique aspect was the label, which had the inn's name, making it look customized. Upon further investigation, I discovered that a substantial amount of money was set to be paid to the tea company. It was priced like bottling tea. Does this plastic bottle really cost $100 each? The tea inside is specially blended for us. The extra cost is for that. Wouldn't it be better to use another tea company? Or is there a specific reason we must use this one? As Nick continued to make excuses, I showed him a printed email. I informed the tea company's president, Mr. Mitchell, that we discovered irregular payments and he confessed. He said you two were high school classmates and planned to split the extra money. That idiot. Why did he confess? That's not important. You should worry about yourself, this could turn into a police matter. Opening the bottle cap, I suggested. How about calming down with this tea? It supposedly has a relaxing effect. Nick drank the tea frantically. In the following days, decisions were made about their fates. Mike was reassigned to the General Affairs Department, with no chance of transfer or promotion, as per Mr. Thompson's orders. As for Nick, since the payment to the tea company hadn't yet been made, he narrowly avoided legal trouble. Instead, he was encouraged to leave the company, and to avoid further complications, Nick submitted his resignation. Rumor has it that connections between HR departments have made it difficult for him to find new employment. Even though it was good to have those two gone, something unexpected happened in the sales department. Everyone became motivated and united in refining the 50th anniversary plan. In the end, my plan was adopted. We collaborated with the Tourist Information Center to provide personalized guides. The plan, tailored to the number of guests, was truly special for the 50th anniversary. Hey, is Adam's family coming to stay? I immediately booked that special plan for my family. Sam noticed it on the reservation list and quickly picked up on it. Yes, I'm inviting my father. That's great. I might invite my parents too. I lacked the courage to face my father just as Adam. But here, with the confidence Mr. Mason praised, I felt ready. The 50th anniversary plan was a perfect opportunity to reconnect with my father. I hoped to bring back the days when we could laugh together as we once did.